I mean, terroir is becoming like a buzzword in winemaking, and winemakers, they hide themselves behind the terroir. They say, oh, I'm working the best terroir in France, I'm working the best terroir in the world. This terroir gives the wine this and that. And of course, yes, it's true in some way. But there's no bigger influence on the wine, there's no more important terroir than the winemaker and his cellar and his choice of barrels or cuves or amphora or whatever he does. The stone itself, the variety itself, is not that important. And I know because I made Grenache Noir tasting like Pinot Noir, I made Gewürztraminer tasting like Sauvignon from Jura. The winemaker is the most important person in the winemaking process, even though time is more important. But he's the one taking, or she is the one taking all the decisions. It's not that I don't like it here. It's not. I know it's a nice terroir for growing vineyards, growing vine, but it could be anywhere. I honestly don't give a shit about terroir. And I think this whole talk about terroir and terroir-driven wines and all these things, it's in natural wine, at least, it doesn't count. Because the process of the winemaking thing is so diverse. The people saying, okay, I prefer the wines from this region or that region, I think they didn't really understand what it's about. What they should say is that I prefer the wines from Bruno Schuller or Stefan Banvat instead of the wines from I don't know who in another region, because they like this winemaker and his style. It's much more that than the terroir. Of course the cellar is a part of the terroir, as the winemaker, as the barrel, as the container in general is a part of the terroir. And the harvest team and the ambience and all these, how do you say, more holistic things. Nobody can make a good, nice tasting wine if they treat their employees like assholes. You know, it's obvious, you know. The whole energy, that's also why we press as we do, vertically, with a wooden press and a stone press, and we put people inside and they crunch it with their feet because they're laughing, they're drinking a bottle of wine. All the energy that goes into the wine. I'm 100% sure. And that's also terroir. And nobody talks about it because of these fucking stones everywhere. And they pick them up and they say, ah, look at me, I have this terroir because my grandfather bought this terroir, and so on, so on. And it's only a way to position yourself, and it's a old school way of looking at it. Because it's not true. You can make a full-blown shitty wine on a great terroir. And you can make beautiful wines on a shitty terroir. So, prove me wrong, but I know I'm right, because we see it all the time. And I agree with you, cellar is a very important part of winemaking, and so are the winemaker. And of course also where it's planted, the exposure, the sun, all these things. But it's not the most important. And it's not even on my top 5 on the most important things to the wine. Our domain has a not a long history, because now it's been just 11 years. But it has several steps into how we structured the whole company. In the first couple of years, I was making wine with Jean-Marc Brignot. He was a friend at that time, also known as a winemaker in the Jura. He wanted to move to Japan to live with his wife. So 13, 14, 15, we made wines together. And then in 16, it wasn't working the way we wanted. So we split up. He stayed in Japan and made a restaurant and made other things. And I continued making wine here in 16. And then in 17, Anne came on board, and since 17, we've been making wines together. We made wine from 13 with grapes that we bought from other winemakers. So the Banvat family in Alsace, and Strik, so Domaine du Marcel here in Ardeche, Gérald and Schüsslin. 13, 14, 15, 16 was like that. And in 17 we started growing our own vines. In 18 we got some more. This year we got a little bit more, but we keep going with these guys still, buying Pinot Gris, Gewürztraminer, stuff like that in Alsace, some grapes from Schüsslin and Gérald here in Ardeche, and so on. What is interesting, for me at least, is doing wine in Ardeche and doing wine in Alsace learns me different takes on winemaking, different cultures. But we now, since a couple of years, try to implementate the way we do vinification in Alsace, here in Ardeche. I personally think sulfur is one of the worst things you can do with a wine. Even a little bit kills the wine completely. I mean, it doesn't mean that the wine is not well made. It can be wine on a high level. Many good winemakers making organic and semi-natural wines are doing incredible wines. Incredible wines. But they add sulfur. For me, it's a disaster because not only can you smell and taste it, so it disturbs my impression of the wine, the terroir, the grape, the winemaker, because you start to taste that spice they add, which is sulfur. That is only on the flavor profile. I feel that is sad because I feel that I miss out on something that could be even better. The magical part about not adding sulfur is that you take the full risk and put it in the hands of the wine. The wine can either decide to be vinegar, it can decide to be a nice normal bottle of wine you will open on a Wednesday evening, or it can decide to be something completely magical. That's the risk or the chance you take by not adding sulfur. When you add sulfur, you cut off the low part. You're sure it's not going to be vinegar, but also you cut off the top part because the wines will be preserved by the sulfur. It's a thing that preserves the wines. So they move less, they evolve slower. Wines with sulfur, you can save them for a very, very long time. Like you can save an apple full of plastic wrapping and I don't know what they put on the apples, but you can put it in the sun in the winter and it will stay there for months and it will still be green. If you take a nice natural organic apple I pick on the tree in the fall here, you put it in the sun for 2 weeks and it will be rotten. And the same goes for wine. It's an unstable product as when you don't put sulfur in it. But if you make it correctly, if you store it correctly, it will not be unstable. And that's where the magic part can appear, is that you can taste old wines without sulfur that are completely magical. That's the whole complex about sulfur. I understand that some winemakers like to put sulfur inside and save their income by not making vinegar, and they need to feed their families and they don't want to take the risk on their person and so on and so on. All that I understand, I respect it. But isolated, seen as a component in wine, I see it as a huge disaster because it takes away so much beautiful emotions, beautiful flavors, and a structure of a wine that you will not get when there's sulfur in it. Without it, it can open a new flavor world that is completely different to what you ever experience. When you use sulfur or any other treatments in the vineyards, it's too late because the diseases are already there. We try to create an environment and immune system for the plants that are strong enough to resist. To avoid using sulfur, which we haven't used since 2019, we make our own products. Some of them, like this one, we make ourselves, the lacto fermentation. So it's seawater and sugar on these plants. Then we use just pure seawater. We mix it all together. And then another part is extractions of different plants and flowers. We use 5 different: lavender, thyme, cad is a local tree, like a bush, romarin, so rosemary, and oregano. And they all got different effects. They are antiseptic plants. Some of them are oxidative. It's not the most interesting because we like to create an acid environment. So the oxidative environment is not necessarily good, but there's some of the plants that are very good for helping the plants not to have these mushrooms that create the diseases. Some of them are more acidic, so them we use as well. And this one is quite acidic. Seawater is more base, so we use it for the reason of salt. And basically it's because we want to preventively treat the vines. It's like putting on a sweater before you get a cold, instead of eating pills when you got a cold. Coming from another background than wine growing has in certain extent, I mean, I think it has liberated us a little bit, because not having a father or a grandfather or family domain you inherited, meaning, of course, that you don't have the vineyard, you don't have the cellar, you don't have anything. You need to create anything. Everything you do is what you do, what you create yourself. But what you also get is complete liberty to do what you want. Other winemakers, they tend to repeat what their parents did because they respect them, because they took over the family domain, they took over their clientele, and so it dictates a little bit their style of winemaking. Anne and I, we come from different backgrounds, but nothing to do with wine in general. I mean, I was a sommelier, I was a restaurateur, and so on. So in some way it had something to do with wine, but not winemaking. And I think that gave us the possibility to rethink the things we do, interact with the grapes in another way, be more, less restrained by traditions and culture, and maybe more to what we feel is the right thing to do ourselves. That's also why when people ask what we do and why, what kind of wines we make and the wines we make in Ardeche, I don't see them as wine from Ardeche. I see them as the wines of Anne and I. We just taste the grapes and we do what we feel is the right thing to do. There's no recipe. The vineyards gives us what they can give us, but from there we take the liberty to interact with the grapes as we want. The way we press, the way we macerate, the way we mix red and white, the quantities, the aging in barrel, whatever it could be. It's changing all the time. And I think that we can do because we have no historical background in winemaking, and we don't have the tradition of making these kind of wines from Ardeche or these kind of wines from Alsace that our grandparents were making hundreds of years before us. There's so many steps in winemaking that is crucial to the winemaking. Pressing is definitely one of them. The way we press has to be extracting the best juice of the grapes. And how do you do that? That's a question that every winemaker is searching for all the time. What I say now, it doesn't mean that it is like that 100%. Some other winemakers would feel differently because they want to make different wines. But for us, it's the truth. What we like with the direct vertical presses, it allows us to press more slowly. So we can, instead of having a mechanical pneumatic press or big basket, the big presses that are turning around and so on, where you can press grapes very fast, meaning 6, 7 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. For us, it's never less than 2 days. More often, 3, 4, some even 5, 6 days of pressing. The best way to press that is in big basket press, because we make so little volume sometimes it can be difficult. So we found this old press in Macon. We went up there to have a look at it, and there was an old winemaker that was the owner, and he took his retirement. And when I called him, he said, it's nice for your wife. She will get an old press in the garden to put flowers in. And I said, no, you misunderstood. I'm a winemaker, I want to use it. And he said, that was a good answer, because I don't want it to be a flower thing. I want it to be a press that continues working. So now all the red wines we do is going through this press. All of them, and even some of the whites, but it's more used for the red wine. 2 days is the fastest, and then up till 3, 4, sometimes 5 days, 6 days, but at the most 6 days. It's not something that I aim for. It's not something Anne and I, we don't say, okay, now we're gonna press for 4 days and it's gonna be fantastic. We aim always to press the fastest possible, but 2 days is the less, we can do it faster. And if we see the mas, so the mass of the grapes are still humid, we continue pressing. But also we don't want to put on too much pressure because it extracts a more green bitterness from the stems. We only want the juice from the grapes, so we press very slowly all the time to have the juice running freely and extracting a little bit from the skin, extracting a little bit from the stems, but also from the pipin, I don't know how the little stones inside. It allows us to extract from the skin the saltiness and also the bitterness that is not tannins. The bitterness that is, because bitterness, you have, I say 15 or 20 or 20, I don't know how many different kinds of bitter notes. Bitterness in wine is not just tannins. Many people think that, but imagine you have citrus, you have unripe apples, you have bergamot, you have orange skin, you have chocolate, you have so many bitterness. So say it's bitter because of tannins, for me means tannins is too much. So the whole idea of pressing this way and also macerating the way we do and doing décuvage the way we do is to press and extract as little as possible from the grapes in terms of tannins, but as much as possible in terms of flavors. When we press like this, the saltiness and that bitterness that I talk about is more pronounced, and the primary fruit of the grapes is less pronounced. I think wine needs to be taken relatively seriously. It takes 1 year, maybe even more, to grow grapes. It takes at least 1 year, maybe more. Sometimes now we just recently bottled a 2013 wine, so more than 10 years in barrel. I mean, it took several years to grow the grapes, 10 years in barrel to age the wine, and you want to drink it from the bottleneck because you find it funny. It has a little bit of conflict in me because I think the wine deserves more respect than that. And when that's said, we try to make wines, of course, that has this easygoing thing, but has another, at the same time, have another tension and complexity into it. Obviously, I, like many other people, like the Ploussard, the Pinot Noir, these things from northern France, Alsace, Jura, Le Gamay from Beaujolais, Loire and so on, because the wines are very drinkable and very light and easy. But they are like that, but also with the complexity. That is what is interesting. And many people forget that when they say, okay, now I want to make easygoing wines. And they do, but they forget about the deep tastes and the deep flavors in the wine. It's part of the curiosity that drives us through the winemaking, is that every year we want to search deeper and deeper into these flavors. The name's very important thing actually. I like to keep it casual, but it's maybe not that casual. Often the names are either explaining how the wine is made in a very maybe unclear way. When a piece of pink rice paper hits the glow of a cigarette, it can seem ridiculous or poetic or whatever to most people. Because what does it mean? For me, it means the difference between 2 days of maceration and 4 days of maceration of Pinot Noir. That little moment where it goes from being something to be something completely different. What are the chances that a piece of pink rice paper, I'm not sure it even exists, hits the glow of a cigarette? It's almost impossible, and once it hits the glow of a cigarette, it will probably burn. For me, that's the winemaking of this wine. It was so light maceration and it was so much in a moment that changed from being what would have become a white wine and what would become a strong, undrinkable Pinot Noir. It didn't. It became a very light, delicate Pinot Noir. Another part could be more political stuff, so less poetic and maybe more directly, don't throw plastic in the ocean, please, or let's eat the world we want to live in, I hope every day, all these things that are saying things more directly to an audience in a way where I think they should think about things. You could say it's a very open-end sentences. So we leave a lot of space for people to reflect or dream away or talk about things. And the very talking about the things is maybe more the point actually, because a bottle of wine, few people drink it alone or people drink it together, and often they're brought to a table. And by having labels that are relatively simple, but with a very complex text, a very direct text, and I hope they would start a conversation about it. I hope it inspires them in some way and push people in a certain direction. That's some of the ideas behind the simplicity of the label. There's also some practical stuff around it that is like every other winemaker in the world. I believe we wanted to make a beautiful label, you know, with an artist and a drawing and a painting and all these things. In 13, the first vintage, we didn't manage to find one. So okay, we decided to print these labels that we now have, put them on as a back label. And then we said, okay, later this year we will find the good artist. We didn't. Japan came, US came, people started to buying the wines. We said, okay, the first vintage, we're gonna sell it like that. Even if it's not the proper packaging we want, we sell them like that. It's the first vintage, nobody will ever remember these vintages anyway. The whole idea of the winemaking idea we had was just to make a few vintages and then go back to do what we did before. I was a sommelier. Jean-Marc that I was working with at the moment, he was running a restaurant in Japan and so on. So I was not set off to be a winemaker. Next year came, we didn't find the artist and so on, and we started to just release the wines like that. So basically our label is the, they seem so designed in some way, but they are just a back label of all the other winemakers here in the area. Everybody keeps saying that we have so unique labels and nobody has done anything like it before. And it's not true at all, because you can go to any winemaker in the area and they will all have the same label on their bottles. They just put it on the back, and we don't put it on the back, we don't put it on the front, because we just have one label. So it's just there, it becomes a label. Since a long time we decided not to make the same wine twice. With my background as a sommelier, what I admire the most is winemakers that are able to make wines over and over again. The people that are digging deep into the terroir and the tradition of their region. So it could be Burgundy or Bordeaux, and Alsace, for example, where they make the same parcels and the same cuvées with the same grapes over and over again, and it's just a vintage that is changing. As a wine professional, I find that very inspiring. It sounds stupid to say that, because when I say that, I also need to say that Anne and I, the way we make wine is to avoid everything like that. We avoid it because of curiosity, basically. I started making wine in 13. It was by curiosity of the winemaking, and I wanted to explore as many different types of vinification as possible to eventually get to the point where I knew this is what I want to make. This is the way it should be. This is the way I feel I express myself and the grapes and the terroir and so on the best. Never came to that point, because curiosity is a force that you can't control yourself. And the more I taste grapes, the more I taste the different kinds of wines, the more I get curious into new styles of winemaking. Not new styles, but new techniques, new dimensions. It gives us some kind of liberty. It gives us some kind of freedom to taste the grapes, taste the juice, taste the barrels, and simply go with the flavors. And also for that reason, we decide to let every wine be a unique wine. Every cuvée has something that we not necessarily repeat. That's also why they got their own names. That's why they got different kinds of formats of bottles, so colors of bottles, formats of bottles, etc. Because it gives us, it gives everyone a new image, new little, identity. I see it maybe, it's not to compare myself with other artists, but a painter will never paint the same picture over and over again. A musician would never make the same piece of music again and again and again and again, because once you made it, you made it. And you will, by the force of nature and curiosity and also creativity, be driven by something new and something that express yourself and the material that you're working with in a new or better way. I sometimes tend to say that the wines that we make is an impression of the moment that we are living in. The moment that we are in when we are making the wine. So 22 is a 22 wine, not only the vintage, but also the vintage Anders and Anne. And 23 will be different. 24, of course, is another vintage, and so on, so on, so on. So when you get a little bite of our wine, you also get a little bite of what happened in the year that we was living in. And I like this freedom. I like this free format of how the wine should be made. I want to make the best wine in the world. I want not in the best wine in the world compared to other winemakers, or compared to put my wines into a competition in New York and Paris and Tokyo and I will be the king of the world. It's not that. I have one single competitor and that is myself. Anne has one single competitor and it's herself. I mean, our wines are competing against themselves. Well, something I often think about is is what we do just a trend? Or is it a movement in some way that push people into a direction where they like what we do? I started working with natural wine more than 20 years ago. In Copenhagen, honestly, in the beginning, it was not a big banger, you know, and when we opened the first restaurants, it was not something people were standing in line for. It became something like that. And now more and more. I hope, at least, the future of natural wine is very bright, because what I see as a movement going from being funny, strange wines, offering something completely different from what you know from classical wines, it became for the intellectual, for the musicians, for the artists, the people that wanted to drink something that represented them and their artistic profile in a way. Now I think it's moving in, it has been moving in since some time, in a more responsible era. People drink natural wine because it's no pesticides. We're not killing insects and bees and birds and so on when we do this. We don't use any chemistry in the vineyards or in the wine cellar or whatever. And people like to drink stuff that are not only good for their body but also good for the environment. And I think we are on the first steps of moving into a new era actually. And I think the future of natural wine now is that it has been a united movement that has been funky, glue, easy, funny labels, provocative labels, environmental movement. Now we're moving into a thing where, I mean, natural wine will actually split into 2, maybe 3 new branches. The more easygoing everyday wine, the more artistic expressions of you never know what's gonna happen. It can be whatever, and it can be oxidative or rosé and sweet wine, and you never know what's coming out of the bottle. And you will have a more classical Grand Cru version of natural wine where you get a super serious, solid, high-level product, but made without sulfur, made without anything artificial in the vineyards, and so on and so on. And I hope that it will be the future of natural wine, that we can create a full palette of wines, as you see it in more classical wines, where you have the shitty rosé of Provence, and you have the Grand Cru of Burgundy, and everything that is in between the two. I'm pretty strong in my belief that the future of natural wine is going in that direction. The people that are arguing against natural wine, being not stable, not well made, etc., they have sometimes a good point. Not that I totally agree with them, because I can't allow myself to agree with them, but sometimes they have, sadly. There are natural wines that are not well made, as there are classical wines that are not well made. But now we also have a part of natural wine that are really well made. We see oxidative wines from the Jura. We see, I'll take Frank Cornelissen and Jean-Pierre Robineau as examples, because they are very, very gifted winemakers on a very high level. And they are every year bringing out bottles that are, without discussion, among the best wines in the world. And they can compete with the most beautiful wines in the world. Also on the classical scene, where they use all the nasty stuff to get their wines in shape, but they do it on a natural level.